Recognize Cindy Cotto for comments.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. The purpose of the work session this evening, this is your third work session, or actually late afternoon, is on budget as it relates to water and wastewater. As we did last week, we updated you on our water master plan, and today Ed will be giving you an overview of the wastewater master plan update. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ed.
Thanks, Cindy. Afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. As the manager said last week, we went over the water master plan update. And in the water master plan update, we really didn't have any significant change in direction. It was essentially just an update from where we were. Some projects moved forward a little bit. Our new Yadkin water supply program was moved forward a few years. Expansion of the Catawba was moved back a few years. But the basic strategy still remained the same, with significant reliance on the new Yadkin supply. Today we're going to talk about our wastewater master plan. Our wastewater master plan update, we do have a shift in strategy, and it's a pretty significant shift that we want to review with the board and hopefully today get your consensus to at least move forward on the next step. So we'll be walking you through again, as we did last week, with what the original 2011 master plan had programmed out, what has changed in our thinking and what we've learned since the 2011 master plan was adopted, and then our recommendations for those changes for moving forward and what they mean to us. So again, the purpose is to present the new strategy to the board on how to meet our wastewater service needs through 2050, essentially creating a new wastewater treatment plant in the Yadkin Basin. To provide you an update on the facilities and capital plan reflective of that new strategy, show you some specific changes then to the proposed FY17 capital budget that you'll be seeing as compared to the FY16 capital budget that you adopted last year. And since this is the last of our workshops dealing with water and wastewater planning, we wanted to give you just an update on the rate forecast and affordability analysis. If we're coming back to you with an updated plan, and this updated plan does cost more money in the 6-year plan, we want to show you what that looks like in terms of the long-term rate impacts and how that compares with previous information we've shared with you. In looking at our wastewater system, I could tell you, and this is probably the most complicated wastewater system for a county that I've ever dealt with in my career or have ever come across in my career. We have a very complicated geography here. We have multiple basins flowing in multiple different directions, some doing 90-degree bends in their direction of flow. And wastewater systems, you try to design wastewater systems to follow gravity, to follow the natural drainage, so we don't have to be pumping wastewater all over the place. And that makes life complicated for us as we went through the original master plan and this update, because it creates all these little separate basins we have to deal with. The 2011 master plan was based upon some significant assumptions. One was that we would not create any new wastewater treatment plants. So on the water supply, the old plan said, yes, we need to create a new Yadkin water supply system. We're keeping with that. On wastewater, we said we're going to continue our reliance on 12 Mile, Crooked Creek, and Monroe. Essentially the two treatment plants we own with Crooked Creek and 12 Mile, and also our partnership with Monroe. And we were going to stay with those facilities and not build another new facility as part of that. Again, the plan required partnering with Monroe. And by partnering, right now we are a customer of Monroe, and what we're looking at in the master plan was to move it to some kind of a partnership equity position with them on the new expanded wastewater plant. We were going to maintain our Crooked Creek wastewater treatment plant at its current capacity and pump any excess flows. We'll be going through that and show you what that means. And again, expand the 12 Mile Creek facility to really serve all of northern and western Union County. So graphically, this is what that plan looked like in 2011, 2012. The areas in blue were areas directly served by the Crooked Creek treatment plant. The 12 Mile Creek wastewater treatment plant. So you can see the entire 12 Mile Creek basin that flows by gravity was all served by the Crooked Creek plant, as well as the northern part of the Crooked Creek Basin, which is this northern leg and parts of the Goose Creek Basin. And they were going to be served by Crooked Creek by a pump station here, pumping over to 12 Mile. We do that now. We have a Poplar Road pump station located at this point that pumps over. The master plan in 2012 said build a new pump station, larger pump station further downstream to be able to pick up more of that service area in the future. The plan also said keep Crooked Creek at its existing capacity, and as that area continued to grow and develop, any flow beyond the capacity of that plant, scalp that flow or pump any excess flow beyond the plant capacity also over to 12 Mile. So the plant put a lot of reliance on the 12 Mile Creek wastewater treatment plant, not only to serve the natural drainage into 12 Mile, but to pick up parts of Crooked Creek and Goose Creek and the excess flow off the Crooked Creek treatment plant. And when we looked at the 2030 numbers, which is what the master plan looked to, those numbers made sense. It made economic sense, and it made sense in terms of the kind of flows we were dealing with. The other major aspect of the master plan was to look at all the areas around Monroe that naturally flow towards Monroe. Monroe is an interesting geography where the areas on the north flow to the south, the areas on the south flow to the north. So you look at these creeks and they all flow in towards Monroe. And the plan at that time said, let's take advantage of the natural drainage. We have a partnership with Monroe right now. Let's explore the ability to expand that partnership. And as these areas grow, which are anticipated to be in the longer term future, not the near term future, we'll be able to pick that flow up and bring it to Monroe, along with the rest of our flow from the east side, which currently goes to the city of Monroe. So that was the basic strategy. We're going to put heavy reliance on 12 Mile to meet future growth on the north and the west, and expand the Monroe treatment plant with Monroe through a partnership to pick up those surrounding areas. That's what I just said. So what changed since that time? This is kind of a little more detail on each of those, just to show you what we're looking at. We would have a total of about 5 million gallons of flow going to Monroe. Most of it from the east side, but some from the south, some from the north. Again, on the Crooked Creek Basin, we'd be taking any excess flows. We're projected to have a total flow of about 2.7 million gallons on a plant capacity of 1.9. We'd be taking that 0.8 and bringing it over into 12 Mile. On this north fork of Crooked Creek and parts of Goose Creek that we serve up in here, we'd be pumping all that flow over about 3.2 million gallons across over into 12 Mile. So what have we learned since 2011 that has now caused us to come back with a recommended change in direction? As we got into the analysis of this new Poplar Road pump station and the force main or the pipeline that we'd have to build to bring the flow over, we realized we had some constraints in our existing pipelines we didn't appreciate until we started forecasting these flows out and actually doing preliminary design. And we just found that we had some significant hydraulic constraints that were going to cause us to parallel a lot of existing pipeline in order to be able to pick up this flow. And as a result, the cost went up significantly from what we had originally forecast we would have to do. The other significant issue we ran into as we started then looking at Monroe for the south area of Monroe and the area to the north of Monroe, and could we get that flow to the Monroe treatment plant? In working with Monroe over the last year, we realized with them that they really didn't have the pipeline capacity in the ground to be able to accept flows from those areas, with the exceptions, one or two small exceptions, which I'll point out as we move forward. So we had assumed we'd be able to work with Monroe and make some capital improvements in their wastewater collection system to accommodate this growth. We're finding out their sewers are already at capacity, and we'd have to come in and make major investments in sewer lines through Monroe, and again, going through the middle of town in Monroe in most cases, in order to achieve that. So that cost went up significantly as we looked at that. And again, just in more detail, this pipe pump over, as we looked at the existing infrastructure, we found about $7 million in additional costs that we had not anticipated in the master plan due to hydraulic constraints. And by 2050, the other thing that changes, as we were doing our IBT for permitting process for the Yadkin project, that forced us to look out to 2050 because that is a 40-year permit from the time we get it, so a 30-year permit from the time we get it. We don't anticipate getting that permit till 2020, so we're looking out to 2050. When we started looking all the way out to 2050 and started looking at the flows that we were generating in Crooked Creek, in Goose Creek, and in that part of the county, we realized we'd be pumping over much more flow than the capacity of the treatment plant we were keeping. So we would be pumping over some 4.5 million gallons of capacity compared to a 2 MGD plant that we were keeping online. And you can see that here where we have a 1.9 MGD plant and we're pumping over 4.5 million gallons per day. So 30% of 12 Mile Creek wastewater plant was now going to be handling flows from Crooked Creek Basin and from Goose Creek Basin. So when we looked at that cost component of it and the fact that we were tying up a lot of capacity in 12 Mile to meet long-term numbers, we really started questioning, is this the right solution? This doesn't look to be making sense that we're going to take all this flow that wants to go by gravity this way and pump it all the way across to the other side of the county. Again, when we looked at 2030 numbers, that made sense. When we started looking long-term, 2040, 2050, those numbers kept growing. That is the growth area of the county. And we said, we think there may be some better solutions. I said the other aspect was the partnership with Monroe was becoming cost prohibitive as we looked at the details of their pipelines, of how do you get flow from south of town through the city. The capacity wasn't there, and same thing on the north end. There were some areas in here, Stevens Creek, where we were able to bring some flow in, and some part of Richardson Creek, Bear Creek, that we're able to bring some flows, and we'll show you that. The other aspect on Monroe is when we started talking in detail with Monroe about what would an additional capacity in your treatment plant cost us. They went and dusted off their plans, and their plan basically says their plan is now 30, 40 years old. I think the original plant was built in the 70s, if not earlier. Their plan is to essentially build a brand new treatment plant, and that's the plan that they are looking at now. So they were looking at our needs, their future needs, and say the best way to do this is build a brand new facility and eventually decommission the existing plant. That was significantly more expensive than we had programmed back in 2011 when we assumed an incremental expansion of their treatment plant. So that changed our dynamic in terms of the comparing cost alternatives. So with our consultants, we looked at 4 basic strategies in terms of how to deal with this. First one is, again, keeping with no new treatment plants. Same treatment plants we have now, and how do we move flow to them and optimize that? Second strategy was build a new treatment plant in the Yadkin Basin / North Fork of Crooked Creek in that area. Third one was to build a new treatment plant in Richardson Creek and handle a lot of our flow from Easton County there. And the fourth strategy essentially combined 2 and 3 and said build 2 new treatment plants. One up in the South Fork of Crooked Creek and one out on Richardson Creek. And we looked at all 4 of those alternatives. Strategy 1 is similar to the original 2012 master plan. The big change is it still kept all this flow from Crooked Creek and Goose Creek coming over, but now added more flow from the north end of Monroe and brought that over, and took all the flow from the south end of Monroe and said bring that over, and limited our reliance on Monroe. So that strategy solved our issue with the Monroe capacity and the cost of running interceptors through the town, but it created other significant issues. It expanded 12 Mile up to 15 MGD before 2050 and required us to move 4.5 million gallons into Charlotte to make that work. So we'd have to amend our agreement with Charlotte where we have 3 MGD of capacity now and add another 4.5 million gallons of capacity to that. So we looked at that and said, that's not a very viable strategy. One, we have no assurance that Charlotte would be willing to enter into that agreement. We're overloading our capacity at the 12 Mile Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant, and we're still doing all this pump over, which didn't look that good to us. Strategy 2, and this is a spoiler alert, this is our recommended strategy, but we'll talk about the other two also. Strategy 2 essentially says, let's create a new treatment plant up in this part of the county that would pick up what's currently being handled by our Poplar Road pump station and future Poplar Road pump station, would be able to pick up the areas north of Monroe that can't get to Monroe, still keep the areas that do flow to Monroe and that they have capacity. So the Stevens Creek, Monroe just built a brand new interceptor pipe in that area and has the ability to serve. Same thing with a small piece of Bearskin Creek, they have the ability to serve that. Keep the whole east side going to Monroe along with a little growth on that, and bring the south side of Monroe over to the 12 Mile Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant. Some of the advantages that this created was to maximize capacity both at 12 Mile and this new facility on the Yakin bases, and relieve that pressure on the Monroe facility. I'll come back into detail on this after I go through those other two alternatives. The third alternative was a new treatment plant on Richardson Creek. This is not too dissimilar from a strategy that was put forward back in 2005, 2006. And the challenge was, where in Richardson Creek would you put this, and how much of this area will you serve? This solved a lot of problems in terms of future capacity and growth, and solved the problems with dealing with over-reliance on Monroe. It did not overly burden 12 Mile, but I can tell you it was a very, very expensive option. It was the most expensive of all the options here. Strategy 4 was similar to the other two, where it said, build a new plant in Richardson Creek to handle these areas, and this new plant up on the northern part of the basin to handle those areas. Solved the issue, but cost became a problem here also. So when we looked at just the cost aspect of this alone, you can see strategy 2 was significantly less than 3 and 4. 3, the new Richardson plant, being the most expensive. Part of the problem there was a lot of areas had to be pumped over into Richardson to get it there. So that became a very expensive option. The 2 plant became an expensive option. Strategy 1, which was keeping the same number of plants we have right now, was slightly more expensive. Our existing master plan, as it's structured right now, when we started looking at in the long-term 2040, started becoming very expensive because of all the pipelines. So strategy 2 is actually cheaper in the long term when we're looking at 2030 to 2050 timeframe. Strategy 2 becomes the cheapest, most cost-effective alternative, even compared to our current master plan and compared to the other alternatives.
Can you go back that slide? What's the Charlotte Water Agreement?
Charlotte Water Agreement, if on some of these strategies, we would have to buy more capacity from Charlotte to make them work. So right now we have an agreement with Charlotte for...
We're buying wastewater treatment.
Yeah, we're buying wastewater treatment capacity, and their McAlpine Creek treatment plant basically handles the
south side of the...
Yeah, the 6 Mile Creek area flows by gravity to their facility. We have an agreement today for 3 million gallons of capacity. Some of these options would require us, options 3, option 4. Option 1 and option 1 requires us to buy additional capacity from them.
But their treatment cost per gallon is less than us, correct?
It has gone up every year for the last couple of years, and I haven't looked at it at a comparison recently. I think it is a little cheaper than our cost at 12 Mile right now. So there is some economies of scale in going with them, but we're not sure they'd be amenable even to selling us additional capacity. They're getting very constrained in McAlpine Creek right now in capacity, and they're looking to build a brand new treatment facility to relieve that capacity constraint. They just got their environmental impact statement approved on that. So the cost right now is reasonable, but they have to build a brand new treatment plant. They charge us a blended cost. We'll be paying for that new capacity.
What has happened to the hill splitter?
Hill splitter is still an issue in Goose Creek, and it's one of the reasons why we've left most of Goose Creek out of our planning area. The land development regulations that came with the identification of the environmentally sensitive species do not prohibit growth and do not prohibit sewer. It puts additional constraints on growth and additional constraints on what you can do with sewer. So if you're going to do sewer there, you have to use ductile iron pipe. You can't use PVC pipe. Your setback requirements are much more significant than they are in other parts of the county, and I don't recall some of the other constraints. So there are constraints to development in there, but they are not prohibitions.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife, they want us to build it or don't want us to build it? Have you talked to them about it?
U.S. Fish and Wildlife has not had to be talked about in terms of this issue right now. If we move forward with our new proposed plan, we'd have to do an environmental assessment. We wouldn't have to do an environmental impact statement. And at that point, I'm sure Fish and Wildlife will weigh in and comment on that.
Before you go, the two plants, would they have the ability to cover a large portion of the unincorporated Union County to the north and east?
It depends where you put that plant. If the plant was put in this location, everything that flew by gravity could go to that plant. If you put it all the way downstream, it gets even more expensive because you've got to build a pipeline all the way down to it. But yes, it would facilitate. The further you go in that direction, the more it would facilitate growth. In the previous master plan, that was one of the alternatives that was raised in the 2012, 2011 master plan, was a new facility in this part of the county potentially. And the board rejected it at that time because they didn't want to promote development in that area. So that was a very deliberate board decision at that time frame not to put a wastewater facility out in this corner of the county.
What year was that, you said?
Excuse me?
When did you say?
Back in 2010, 2011, when this plan was adopted. I think the concern at that time was the density of development that a wastewater treatment plant in their area would facilitate. What I need to make you most aware of is the cost implications of this new strategy, and we'll go back and talk about some of the other aspects, but on a cost perspective, again, long term, we're saving some $20 million and compared to other alternatives. And that's the positive news, that this is the least cost effective, the least cost alternative as we go forward. One of the numbers you can see, we've got $50 million plugged in here for Monroe for our cost of building improvements in Monroe. That is a very rough estimate. That number, if anything, would go up, not down, because again, going through existing municipalities.
In the original plan, you've got the 12-mile creek going to 12 million gallons a day.
Yes.
In strategy 2, you've got it going to 15. Where's the cost for that?
That's out in the 2050 time frame before we go to 15. So this is looking at comparable time frames.
Beyond 2050.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like right at that 2050 window is our current projection. So we debated, do we show it in? Do we not show it in? Because we're not that good at forecasting how much capacity we'll exactly need in 2050. But compared to the other strategies, it's much sooner that we would be having to build that capacity. The big advantage on this is that, on this strategy too, is that we really get to defer future expansions for 12 mile. We'll go to the 9 MGD, and that 9 MGD will probably last us close to 2030 before we'd have to go to 12. That 12 could last us all the way out to 2050 before we'd have to go to 15. In these other alternatives and the current master plan, we'd be at 2015 by 2030. So it really builds long-term capacity. I'm fortunate enough to have been in this industry now long enough where 30, 40 years doesn't seem that long to me anymore. And I look at facilities I was involved with in growth communities 20, 30 years ago and see how they've grown. And I think one thing we look at in this community is that this community is still growing and will probably continue to grow in these areas that we've identified for wastewater service. One of the things that we want to do with this update is make sure we have provided the ability for that long-term capacity and not constrain ourselves in the 2030, 2040 timeframe.
But you've got 9 million gallons a day is a $12.5 million cost. And 12 million gallons a day in the original strategy, but not in strategy 2?
Yes, because the 12 million gallon is not there. This isn't a 2030 planning horizon, and the next expansion is outside that horizon. So this is looking at year 2030 of what we need to build between now and 2030. So between now and 2030, we're going to be able to save doing that expansion on 12 Mile. Now we're going to spend that money on the new treatment plant. So
If I go back to one of your slides, doesn't it show 11 million gallons a day in the 12 Mile plan?
in 12 Mile, in this graphic, yeah, we have a lot of graphics here. In this graphic, we were looking at year 2050. We're looking long-term and what we would be. So we'd be at 15 MGD or just about at 15 million gallons per day on this strategy.
At 2050.
By 2050. And not having to pump any additional flow over to McAlpine Creek.
So when do we get to that 11 million that's shown?
Not-
Am I missing it? Showing 11 million
Oh,
gallons?
this 11 here, this is the natural flow just from inside this area here. So yeah, that's the 2030 timeframe. We're at 11, say 12. So am I getting that right?
That's 11's 2050. 2050.
That is 2050.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the 15 million is well beyond the 2050 timeframe.
Mhm.
You know, we had one thing that concerns with your statement about past boards saying that we didn't want to grow up in the northern and, I call it northern eastern part of the county. But it's creating problems for us because we're only facilitating growth in the western part of the county. And we're maxing out on wastewater, we're maxing out on schools and roads. So do we need to revisit whether or not we want to facilitate some growth in that part of the county and spread it out?
Well, it puts you into either strategy 4 or strategy 3 that has you building a facility in this area. So if you're going to build a facility in this area to promote development in that area, these are the alternatives you would look at, either 3 or 4. And the challenge is they're expensive alternatives.
Stay there 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
The reason they're expensive is because you're pumping water from Poplar, the pump station all the way over.
Mhm.
There's a lot of pipe had to be put in the ground. If you didn't have to put in that pipe, if you gave that area a break and didn't increase sewer availability in that area, you know, Porter Ridge, Sun Valley, all those schools that we're hearing right now that are burdened right now, you know, why burden them even greater? This Richardson Creek plant answers a lot of questions, and this is something I was in favor of back then, and because it helps Monroe. If Monroe wants to grow anymore and they run out of capacity, they can go into that Richardson Creek plant more easily. You can help Wingate, you can help Marshall. The bypass is going to be near that area, so you can open the areas in and around Monroe, Wingate. The towns that are designed to handle and can handle some growth, especially commercial growth, can be there. If you go up in the New Salem area, there's another problem that you're having. The schools there, again, they're not designed to hold large numbers of kids, so you can build new schools. You're spreading the growth out, which, you know, Jerry and I both understand that you don't want that urban sprawl. You know, it helps to have the quarter acre lots because you save a lot of farmland, you save a lot of areas from being developed. You know, plus, again, moving the kids around, building new schools in that area to handle that. You know, 218 becomes even more congested. There's a lot of problems with that the community was expressing back then. It was a more difficult thing to grow up in that area like that. But you do answer a lot of issues and problems with this plan. So if we wanted to do this plan and we did not pump from Poplin, if we're not creating growth in and around those areas, Henry Bridge, Indian Trail, how much does that save if you're not putting in that pipeline to pump that stuff across?
Well, the option you're looking at is basically this option of building a Richardson Creek facility, and you would still need to build capacity here. I mean,
Why do you need to build capacity there?
because we're forecasting that growth will happen there.
If there's a sewer plant, yeah, I guarantee it will. But if there's not a sewer plant just yet, if that's delayed out even further, then it does give that area a break where the schools are overcrowded.
Well, you're absolutely correct. I mean, if the board says we are not going to provide additional capacity in that area, you will be creating a moratorium on sewer in that area. I mean, that would be a board policy decision make that says in this part of the county, we are not going to provide that additional capacity.
Because I think you're going to have a lot more trouble maybe with Fish and Wildlife than if that hill splitter is still an issue. In talking to them, you know, this is all through this, and when we were going through building the plan on Rocky River, I was in discussions with them. They absolutely did not want it's not the sewer pipe that bothered them, it was the pervious surfaces and the growth.
And we're not, and you can see this whole area, the only areas we're proposing to serve are the areas in color.
Right.
So we have left out this area of Goose Creek we currently serve. So this is part of our service area right now that gets pumped over into Crooked Creek Basin. We are not proposing to serve this area. If that area was to be served in the future, it would require additional capacity to do that. Same thing in this part of the county. We have no plan right now, based upon the current master plan that's been adopted by the board back in 2011. We drew these lines on the map and said outside those lines, outside these lines down here, we are not planning to provide sewer service. And that if a community outside our boundaries wants sewer service, we'll work with them on a case-by-case basis to see how sewer could be brought to that area. But that you're bringing up, you know, some of the major issues that were discussed 5 years ago in terms of where do you draw this line, where do we provide sewer capacity, and where don't we? And we looked at this in concert with our planning department, growth management now, in terms of looking at where is the projected growth, where is the land use that's conducive to providing sewer. And this is how these lines got drawn. And essentially, these lines here are drainage basin boundaries. So this area all wants to flow this way. These areas flow south and other directions. This area is all going up Richardson Creek. So the only way to serve this area without pumping again is to put a treatment plant further and further down that direction. The reason for this location of the plant is saying we would put this new plant essentially at 601 in that area and be able to pick up areas that we currently serve and areas adjacent to it.
The capacity that we free up in Monroe by taking Wingate and Marshall and putting them into a new Richardson Creek plant, that would free up capacity for the south side of the county, which is in the Rocky River Basin, right? That's where the green arrows are going in?
Yeah, this is all part of, got the creek that goes into, I mean, Rocky River is up here. This is Richardson Creek is the main drainage. I forget the name of this drainage, and this is part of what flows into their series of lakes.
Our jobs, our plants in the airport area, all those would flow into that. That would create capacity in Monroe if we could take Wingate Marshall off of Monroe.
The challenge there, Commissioner, is that when we looked at the infrastructure cost of getting that flow into Monroe, it was just excessive. I mean, we could serve this area much easier just by pumping it over the 12th mile.
So they don't have they're pumping currently from the industrial area around the airport.
Yeah, the industrial area we looked at very specifically. There's one small area they could pick up here and bring that over to their facilities. Right. These areas here, we looked at the cost comparative. It was much cheaper for us to put a pump station in and pump it over into 12 Mile.
Does any of this strategy help with the interbasin transfer? I mean, is it by pumping from not pumping from Poplin to 12 Mile Creek, is that a requirement that we're gonna need for water from yet?
It's one of the reasons that this stays on this pump over stays in place until the Yakin water treatment project is online.
Right.
And until Yakin is online, we have to have flows coming back in order to meet our continuing IBT requirements. Once the Yakin project is online, we have a lot more flexibility. The plan, and what's not shown on here, is that the infrastructure we have in place now to be able to divert flows, we will keep that infrastructure in place. And it's part of our ability to really optimize all of our facilities. So right now, we can take flow from the 12 Mile Creek and we can divert some of that flow up to about 2 million gallons per day over into McAlpine Creek. We don't use that capability right now because we have capacity in 12 Mile. As that capacity starts peaking out, we can utilize that for stall capacity of the new expansion. Same thing here, as we build a new facility, we'll keep this online, keep some of that pump over, and optimize both projects. But as the Yakin comes online in 2022, the need to be pumping flow over will go away in terms of an IBT requirement.
So again, with that pipe, that pump station and that pumping over to Richardson Creek, taken out of it, how much does that save you?
Strategy three is
Most expensive.
Is most expensive with everything going to Richardson.
Right.
Strategy 4 is the 2.
Yeah,
And you can see the difference between strategy 4 and strategy 2 is about.
what's the big line? What's the big light purple line? What is that? New.
New Richardson Creek Water Reclamation Facility.
Yeah.
Is that the cost of the facility, or?
Yeah, that's the cost of building the plant.
Why does it cost so much more? I mean, it's a
More capacity. So on this, you're putting everything in one plant, and this you're splitting it between.
What if you build it half? What if you didn't build as much because you're not going to need as much?
Well, this is looking at our projected needs through that 2050 timeframe. So we're comparing apples to apples here in all these scenarios.
Okay. So if you did it at half the capacity, like about a 6 million gallon plant, that's what it is on there.
Not even.
So if you got the
Yeah,
permits to do
6.9.
6 million or whatever it is, and you like a lot of plants, they mirror image, they build and then they plan on expansion, just like we did at 12 Mile Creek. So if you did a 3 million gallon plant, how much need do we have in Wingate and Marshall right now?
The total flows right now about 1.5 million gallons per day.
So about half that capacity would be taken up by Wingate and Marshall, then you'd still have another million.
I understand where you're going with this, Commissioner, and you're right. When we implement whatever plan we implement, we're not going to build a 2050 capacity tomorrow. We're not going to build a 2030
Right.
capacity tomorrow. We'll build them incrementally.
Right. But you have to ask for the permit. I mean, you have to.
We can get a 20-year permit. It's the most we can get on wastewater is a 20-year period. So we look out from the permitting to the 20-year needs, just like we did on 12 Mile. We have a 12 MGD permit on 12 Mile Creek. We're expanding to 7.9 to 9. We won't get to that 12 until 20 years out, but we're going to build it incrementally to get there. The purpose of this analysis was to give you really an apples-to-apples comparison of the cost of the same amount of capacity needs across these different alternatives. So if you start going, well, can we phase this one? Yeah, we can and will phase all of them. This is really looking at present value of these alternatives.
I just want to make sure, because back then it was made a big issue that this was going to be so much more of an expensive plant because of the pumping and doing all the other stuff. My argument back then was the same, as you don't have to do the pumping. And what we need to do, I feel we need to do, is help Marshall, Monroe, Wingate, to be able to expand their commercial and their even if they're residential, if they want to, base. And that's where the growth is expected, and the high density growth could occur. The infrastructure is more in place there than it is out in the New Salem area or other places. But it does give an opportunity for those, like I said, for those areas to grow. It gives some relief to Monroe and then Monroe can continue to grow. And then when we bring the water in, Monroe, Wingate, Marshall all can benefit from that as far as a growth center. The schools are not horribly overcrowded on that side of the county. But more commercial development, I think, will take place other than residential, not knowing what the impact of the bypass is.
We assumed, a couple of basic assumptions that go into this. So all of the areas that are in color here are assumed to be served by Union County. We're saying it's our obligation to meet the projected needs in these areas. So any of the strategies will give Wingate, Marshall, and that area the capacity that they need. So all the strategies meet the needs of our customers in these areas. So it's not, gee, if we do this strategy, this area won't get service or will get less service. Our strategies are based upon the fact that we will meet the service demands as projected for all of these areas. So we take that as an equalizing factor in all of our analysis.
Well, and Plan 2 allows you to utilize existing infrastructure, correct? Rather than have to put Richardson in all the piping, the plant itself has to be put in there.
Mm-hmm.
And the current water plan doesn't have us putting water in that area for, was it 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it exists on the plan if I recall correctly. Nothing going in that area, so you're talking about commercial growth, you're talking about changing the water plant and the wastewater plant.
You're really talking about going in and changing your land use. I mean, your land use in this area is 1 unit per acre residential.
That's all
I mean, that's all it is right now. So, and that's, our water and wastewater plans try to follow a land use plan. So if the board wants to change land use plan and say we want to make this a major commercial hub, then we would modify our water and wastewater plans to match that. But right now, we're going off the adopted land use plan, which is saying, yeah, this is 1 unit per acre residential and plans to stay that way per the plan. So we based it around that.
It depends on how far down Richardson Creek you put it.
Mm-hmm. So we look very seriously at that. I mean, it was one of the alternatives. I mean, there were innumerable alternatives that we kicked around, and we brought it down to these 4 because we looked at the same thing going, this area all wants to flow that way by gravity. Wouldn't it be great to build a treatment plant here? One thing I do want to point out in this strategy is that this last bullet here, that this strategy allows us time to negotiate an expansion with Monroe that could result in a new jointly owned treatment facility somewhere in Richardson Creek. Because right now we're sitting there talking with Monroe, and Monroe goes, yeah, we need to build a brand new treatment plant. We want to put it across the street from our existing one. And we're going, well, gee, if we're going to partner with you and you need to build a whole brand new facility, is this the right location? Or do we want to go further downstream? Do we want to go down near the county landfill? Do we want to go even further downstream? Because at that point, it may start making more economic sense, and they're willing to partner with us on a facility down there as part of their long-term growth needs. Because they're saying their treatment plant is aging out, and they're going to need to replace it. We're not there today, but we think with this strategy, it still says we still have 4.5 million gallons of flow going to Monroe on a current capacity of 2.65. So we need more capacity with Monroe. That capacity need doesn't trip until about, our numbers say 2024, their numbers say 2028, but we're still looking at 8 to 12 years before we need to build an expanded Monroe facility. That gives us some time, we think, to really work that partnership with Monroe and go, okay, instead of expanding your plant here, maybe we put it here. And also, we can eliminate 2 pump stations and flow by gravity. We can all look at commercial or other development in this immediately adjoining area and see if that makes sense. And this option certainly doesn't block that and facilitates looking at that as a long-term solution.
The closer we were to build, if we were to build a Richardson plant, the less area we can actually service because of the geography.
Yeah. At some point, anything past that, you're now pumping it back to that treatment plant instead of flowing by gravity. And it's, I started this presentation by saying we have a very complex geography. I mean, the problem we have with our existing Crooked Creek treatment plant, it's like right here. And, you can look back now in 40-year hindsight to when this plant was built and go, gee, why didn't they build it a lot further downstream? Well, because there was nobody there then. So they built it where the development was as far downstream as they could economically justify. And that's the challenge we have in this part of the county. Our development is here and everything's draining away from it. We're very fortunate in 12 Mile, everything drains towards where the development was. So we started the treatment plant here, the development's in this area, and the development's moving out in that direction and going upstream and expanding. Here our challenge is we build a treatment plant, I gotta build a pipeline all the way to it. And you wind up in situations 30, 40 years from now, do you move it further downstream, do you pump back? And that is a tough economic decision because these plants are expensive. So again, we think this is a preferred option because one, it's the least cost, long-term option. It really creates long-term capacity for this part of the county and this part of the county, which is right now our growth areas, and doesn't lock us down where some of the other, option one in particular, and the current master plan, really start locking us down. 15 MGD is about where we can get to with 12 Mile Creek from two perspectives. One, we start getting a little land constrained in terms of the site. And more importantly, right now, we have a total phosphorus loading that we can discharge from that plant. Not a concentration level, but a total number of pounds of phosphorus per month that we can put into the stream. So the more flow we put in, the lower the concentration has to be to meet that total pound loading. And when we started getting up to 15, we're pushing levels of technology. Now, 20 years from now, technology may be a lot better, may not be an issue, but it's an issue I would prefer not to constrain my successors with of, who built this roadblock for me 20 years ago. So it gives us that capability to easily, that 15 MGD is lasting us beyond 2050 in this option. Crooked Creek is not nearly as sensitive of a stream, and discharging down here, we think no problem in getting this permit compared to what we had to deal with in 12 Mile. And again, looking at a future option, does another facility here with Monroe make sense where they abandon their plant, move it further downstream in partnership with us? We think that's part of the long term. Let's take another look 5 years from now. Our plan is every 5 years to come back to this board with this kind of an update. We do essentially an update every year as we update our CIP and bring that to the board for approval. But every 5 years, we've recognized in a growth community like ours, the assumptions change, they change, certainly within a 5-year planning horizon, and need for us to come back. One slide that I need to emphasize with you though, that kind of walk through. Now I focused on this one initially, we're going to save $20 million in the long run. Kind of jumped over this slide, and I think this is the more important one for you to understand, is that even though over the 2030, 2040 planning horizon, strategy 2 is the cheapest alternative and saves us $20 million over the others, it requires us to upfront some costs to start this new treatment plant. And it adds $25 million to our CIP compared to the FY16 CIP. So what we've shown you here is this is the approved FY16 CIP with regard to our wastewater projects. And here's what it would be with this new option. You can see we're building a whole new treatment plant, but we get to forego $12 million on Crooked Creek Basin improvements. We get to forego $36 million in Eastside Monroe treatment plant improvements. We get to forego about $5 million in other collection system improvements. You don't see any savings in 12 Mile in the 6-year horizon. The savings on 12 Mile are on the next 10-year horizon is where you see the big savings there. So it adds $25 million upfront in the next 6 years in order for us to move quickly with getting this facility online.
And the Poplin Road interceptor is, tell me what that is.
The Poplin Road,
Down at the bottom.
yeah, this is an extension of the existing interceptor down to the treatment plant. So we have to build an interceptor down along from Poplin Road Pump Station as it exists today,
To the
further downstream to this new treatment plant.
Creek.
Yes. So that's what that interceptor is, and the plant itself, we're estimating at about I keep saying we're going to round all these numbers because it looks like we actually know that it's going to be $69,784,000. Yeah, it's $70 million plus or minus 15–20% is the level of accuracy on these numbers right now. So here's the issue I know you want to ask, can we still afford this plan then? This is a slide I showed you last week, which is a combined water and wastewater capital plan through 2030. And even with adding this $25 million up front, as we go through 2030, we actually save money with this program. On the water, we added money, saved money. Bottom line, between now and 2030, our capital improvement program stays substantially the same, 3% difference. That's well within the level of accuracy of these numbers that are, again, plus or minus 10%. So even though we're moving monies around, and we're, in this case on wastewater, we're advancing money, the total stays about the same. We looked at our rates and said, what does this mean to our rates for the next couple of years? And this is a snapshot I took from the 2011 rate model. The board actually didn't adopt this rate. We had recommended front-loading the rates and doing a 7% increase and then dropping it down, and the board approved 3.5 across the board. What I want to point out is we've always projected that as we got out into the 2020 timeframe, there'd be a significant jump in our rates, essentially to pay for the Yadkin project and to pay for some of our wastewater treatment plant projects. So we had forecasted this out in 2011. Our 2014 update that we brought to the board showed similar kinds of numbers. What we're looking at now in this time frame is we're currently in this 3-year window of rates, and the board will next be taking up rates not this fiscal year but next fiscal year. And what we're forecasting for the next time the board will have to look at rates is the biggest jump we've seen in the area of 9, 8, and 8 for those 3 years of 18, 19, and 20. But then dropping off dramatically. And essentially what we've done over the years was ratchet our rates up to be able to keep them at a reasonable level, build that bonding capacity to be able to cover the debt for these new water plants, new wastewater plants. And as we bring them online, we now have that rate capacity to meet that debt, and our rates really normalize after that. What I wanted to point out is, okay, are they affordable and what do they look like? Some of the board will remember that we did not raise our rates for a 10-year period. From 1999 really through 2011, this board did not increase the water and sewer rates at all. And we counted on growth during that time frame to really cover what we were doing. What we did was take our rates in 1999 and plot out what our actual rates were, and then plotted out what the projected rate increases are through 2020. And we compared that against, take the 1999 rates and do a 3% increase per year, essentially about what the cost of service index is for water and wastewater utilities, actually a little less than what that would be. And you can see that if you just took the 1999 rate and projected out at 3% growth, you'd be in the same spot in 2020. And this is for a customer using 3,000 gallons per day. For a customer using 7,000 gallons per day, you wind up in the same spot. For our high-end users, they followed pretty much the same spot until this last year or two, because we are hitting them hard. And we think that's appropriately so, because they don't pay higher impact fees for the capacity they get, and they're using more capacity, so they're paying a premium rate.
So what's the average gallons per month?
The average gallon per month of our customers is around 4,500 to 5,000 gallons per month when you look at system-wide average. So we were looking at a low-end use, a little higher than average use, and then very high use. We looked at some other parameters on affordability. Affordability is becoming a very big issue in the water and wastewater industry now. Mostly driven in the Midwest, Northeast by major environmental consent orders from EPA requiring massive improvements in wastewater collection systems to the point where it's impacting communities' ability to pay.
How do those rate increases translate if we go into water restrictions?
The increase is the same. What happens, we ratchet the rates up, particularly at the higher. So when we go into Aubrey, I'm going to let you See if your memory is better than mine on this. As we go into the first stages,
It's the highest tiers only there.
only the highest tiers in the first stages. So tiers 4 and tiers 5, the ones that are using those over 10,000 gallons per month. As we go into severe drought, stage 3, stage 4, that increase starts coming down to all the tiers. And the increase is designed to try to recover the revenue we will lose due to conservation. So it tries to keep it revenue neutral for us, that if we're putting in a stage 3 that is looking at a 5-6% reduction in usage during that stage of drought, we bump up the rates, one, to promote that conservation, and two, to try to recover some of that money we would lose due to that conservation.
And what happens to our operating costs during those stages?
They don't go down significantly. Most of our costs are unfortunately really fixed. So the only variable components we have is really power and chemicals. So if you're pumping less water, we have a little less power, a little less chemical. Our people are all the same, our maintenance are all the same. It's not a big variable cost. We actually did a true cost analysis on water and sewer rates. 80% of your cost would be fixed and 20% would be variable. But that doesn't promote conservation. So we make a much smaller percentage fixed. The only percentage that's fixed really covers our debt, is what we're covering with our fixed portion. The rest of our cost, even though a lot of them are fixed cost or relatively fixed cost, are put into our gallonage charge. What this is showing, this is our current rate, and this is rate off School of Government website. They have this great dashboard where they essentially collect data from all the utilities that are willing to contribute, which is probably over 100 utilities, I think, in the state right now, that, or not
I
more.
want to say 300 in that whole.
How many?
Around 300.
Around 300 utilities that contribute data to this website. So you can compare your rates with other utilities around the state. You can sort it in different ways, geographically, similar size, similar income level. This compares us to similar size utilities in North Carolina. And from just a comparison to other rates, the median rate for utilities our size right now is around $70 for water and sewer, and we're down at $55. With our 2020 proposed rates in place, we'll be up around $75. At that point, the median, we didn't ratchet them up. We looked at current median, so we just ratcheted ours up and said, we're still very much in this green territory. It's still right in the middle of the pack. This conservation rate is just how good are our rates at promoting conservation. So our rates, even in 2020, after this next round of rate increases, are still very comparable to other utilities our size. I think more important for the board, though, is this issue of affordability. It's one thing to say it's comparable, but can our customers afford this? So this is our current rates, and there's two things on the dashboard that showed up here. One is affordability. And you can see right now the School of Government uses 2% of median household income, saying if your combined water and sewer bill is below 2% of median household income, you're doing great. You're in the green. As you start getting up to 3%, a little cautionary, you're over 3% into 4%, and they go, yeah, you really want to look at that in terms of affordability. I tell you, EPA uses a much less conservative number. EPA's index is 4.5% for combined water and sewer in terms of affordability. But they have one category, that's it, affordable or not. So we use the state criteria of saying we'd like to be in this less than 2% of median household income. And you can see right now we're well below that, we're at 1%. You put our 2020 rates in there, we're still below 2% on average for all of our customers at 1.37. We got fancy this year because I went to a conference and learned what some other folks are doing, particularly communities like ours that have a high disparity in median household income. And I actually saw a paper presented by Washington, D.C. Water in the Washington, D.C. area. So if you've been to D.C. area, you know that includes Georgetown, which makes Weddington and Waxhaw and Marvin look poor. And on the other extreme, you have the southwest quadrant of DC, which is a very economically disadvantaged community. So we looked at similar statistics. We said, what does Union County look like in terms of median household income? And you can see we have significant variance between those making less than $35,000 a year. And it's really just this area in Monroe here. Tough to tell the difference between this color and this color, but it's really just this area in Monroe. In the areas we serve, there's no area below $35,000 in median household income. And we do have some communities that are over $100,000 a year in median household income. And you can see that spread here. What we did then was took this median household income data by census tract and looked at our actual usage by the census tract. What are our customers in these areas doing? And not surprisingly, the same thing that DC Water found, those in higher economic brackets are using a lot more water. Folks in Marvin irrigate their lawns and irrigate them a lot. Folks out here aren't. So you see that difference in usage, and it ranges from a low average in these categories of about slightly less than 4,000 or 4,000, just over 4,000 gallons per month, and on the high end, just over 8,000. So you've got a more than doubling of average usage between the 35,000 to 45,000 economic levels and the higher end levels. So we said, okay, let's take those income levels and those usages and our rates and go, is it affordable for those people? Let's forget about averages. Is it affordable for those people making $35,000 to $45,000 a year? And that's what this graph is showing you, is that in the $35,000 to $45,000 a year net household income bracket, we're still less than 2% with our current rates. And you can see, obviously, on the high income levels, even though they're using twice as much water, they're making 4 times as much money almost, 3 times as much. So the affordability is even greater there. So in our worst case scenarios, we're still below that 2%, which is really good. And as you ratchet those rates up to 2019 and 2020, yeah, for our lowest income, we start bumping up near that 2%. But again, that 2% is saying if you're below 2%, you're doing well. You're well in the affordable range. It's when you're getting up at 3% and higher that start raising red flags. So I think this is really good news for us as a utility, for us as a county that says, you know, we were very frugal over 10 years. We did not raise our rates. We manage our program aggressively. We've managed our capacity aggressively. We haven't built much of anything in the last 10 years and are just now moving into expansion. We've leveraged partnerships with Monroe, with Charlotte Water, with Lancaster Water and Sewer District to meet our short-term capacity needs. And as a result, we're keeping our rates very affordable. Now, yes, they're going up, and they're going up at a rate that's higher than we've seen. But the national forecast on this for water and sewer utilities is looking at 6.5% per year as the average rate increase across the country for the next 5 years. So that comes from American Water Works Association national rate study that they do each year. So the costs are going up. We think we've done a good job of maintaining that cost, of managing our money. Jeff has done a great job of managing our debt portfolio and our finance to help manage these programs. So we think it's good news for the board that, yes, we can still afford this. Again, the board doesn't need to take any action on this issue this year, but we thought it was important if we're bringing you a program that's adding $25 million in the 6-year window, you needed to see what does that mean in terms of rates over the 6 years, and it still paints a very good picture, we think. So summarizing, we think Strategy 2 provides the most cost-effective solution that provides the best long-term wastewater capacity solution. Again, it provides long-term capacity in the north and western parts of Union County, which have been our historical growth. It provides the ability to partner with Monroe on a new Richardson Creek facility if that's the direction both entities want to go in. It meets all of our capacity needs and doesn't lock us down as we get long-term. It does add additional $25 million into our 6-year CIP, but saves us $20 million when we start looking out to 2030 and 2040. It requires us, though, to move pretty aggressively on this new wastewater treatment plant. And one of the things I would like to get consensus from the board on is to meet our needs of getting this treatment plant essentially to meet our projected growth. Will need to be online in around 6 years, and that's a pretty aggressive schedule for a new treatment plant. We need to do some stream modeling of the Crooked Creek Basin, looking all the way downstream as part of a permit. The modeling and testing needs to be done in the summer, which is the worst low water conditions. We need to move on that right now, otherwise we miss this whole summer and we lose a year. So we'd like at the end of this meeting to get consensus from the board to at least move forward with this water quality modeling and monitoring. We'll still be bringing back to the board, follow-up decisions on design and construction. But if we don't take some action now, we're looking at about $100,000 contract to get that modeling started. So we're going to be asking you for that at the end of this workshop.
How many additional households are you looking at adding between now and 2024?
Whoa, there's a tough question.
And how does that figure into your rate modeling?
We use these, let's see, we're looking at, I'm going to let you engineers in the corner go pull out a calculator and run some numbers. But we're looking at about 2.5% growth on our current, per year on our current customer base. And right now we've got, say, 45,000 water customers. So I'll let somebody there run the numbers because I don't have a calculator and I can't do that in my head.
So have those rate increases taken into account the household growth?
Yes.
Over that time?
Yeah, so we're using the same growth in our rate model as we do in our master plan. In fact, we use a little bit less growth in our rate modeling. We discount that growth and discount that usage to try to be conservative. And you're conservative the other way in your master plan. So when you're forecasting facility needs, you want to slightly over forecast to make sure you have what you need. But when we're forecasting revenue, we tend to be conservative in the opposite direction, say, let's not count on getting quite all that revenue in. So we try to be conservative to make sure we don't plan this too tightly.
So there's leeway in the rate increases that you're projecting?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that as we get into this next year, we will be fine tuning this and looking at, okay, where exactly is our revenue today? What are the, we're forecasting this at right now 4.5% cost of 4.5% interest rates in our bonds, and a 25-year bond. One of the potentials on this new wastewater plant is to look at state revolving loan funds. The state is looking at a brand new program right now. We're all thinking this is going to be adopted this short session. The rules we're hearing about are very favorable. We could be looking at 0.5% interest rates without the burdensome rules that made you spend a lot of administrative money. I mean, that on $80 million would be a significant benefit. So again, this was just to look at, okay, based upon the world as it is today, what are the numbers looking like? Because if we came in with this plan and it said you needed a 12% rate increase, we wouldn't be sitting here. We'd be back at the drawing board going, we need a better plan, because you see the head nodding. This lady was not going to allow me to come forward with a 12% rate increase.
But you're coming close at 9.
We worked very hard to get it below double digit. I mean, we've had a number of meetings where I said that is just, I know that's what we told the board back in 2011, but that's just not going to fly.
But potentially, when the new rate increases are coming into effect, if we have some other funding sources, that number could go down to 6, hopefully, 4.
So,
I make no guarantees other than we
Just
do
say
our
yes.
very best to make sure that they're at the least possible amount.
yes,
Ed, I think your comment wanted us to make some kind of decision. This has been a lot of information thrown at us, and this is the first time we've seen any of it. I would ask that maybe we can make a decision next Monday night, give us a little time to digest this a little bit. I mean, if we want to accept this, it could be a consent agenda item. And if there's questions, then we can move it to discussion. But this is a lot of, a big step to take with such short notice. And
Yes, ma'am.
Minimal
And
information.
just, I mean, we're not looking for the board tonight to say, bless the strategy, go forth and do it. No, we're not expecting that at all. The only thing I was hoping to get is on us being able to move forward with the water quality modeling and monitoring of that basin, so we get a jump on the program, assuming the board adopts the master plan as presented. But no, you have not adopted the master plan. We're not asking you to adopt the master plan. We will be bringing that back to you in May after you've had time to read through this. Again, you know, me and my staff and our consultants are available at any time to meet with individual board members to discuss any concerns or questions you have. Because yes, we do recognize this is a lot of material for you to digest in a short period of time, and we're not looking for any head nodding, except I don't want to be out there spending $100,000 underneath the manager's contract limit without this board knowing we're doing that, because it's advancing this agenda. But that's all it does. It advances it. It doesn't commit us to that agenda.
Frank, do you have any questions? Jerry, do you have any questions?
I just wanted to clarify for me, I think I heard you say this, but that all the strategies presented, the 4 strategies, are consistent with the sewer boundaries for our long-range land use plan.
That's correct. Yeah, they all look at the same service area boundaries, all use the same growth projections within those boundaries. So they don't make any assumption that says we're going to jump out past that and serve someplace new, or exclude some area that had been served in the past.
Appreciate your slide on the median income too. Now I know why my neighbor across the street has a much better automobile.
Do you wish for us to bring on the 18th agenda the water modeling component?
Yes, we actually have a task order ready to go. We could bring that to the board as a consent item to approve that task order.
First of all, the presentation was great. I don't question anything that you're saying. I mean, I know your numbers are good. I know what you're saying is right. But when we look at $102 million high schools, this area where we're looking at putting number 2, we're concentrating on the area where that high school is full. That's the worst. Look at the numbers on the Kevin. That's the most overcrowded area. So we're going to concentrate on the worst crowded area that we have. Again, $102 million high schools, it used to be $40 million. Now it's going way up. The bad thing about this job is we got 2 different things. We may save $20 million on a sewer plant, but we may spend $102 million on a high school, or worse. Middle and elementary, it could cost a lot more than the $20 million we're going to save. So while I don't question the numbers, I'm not saying that you're pushing something that you shouldn't. It's your job to push this. This is the plan that you're pushing. But we do, as a board, have dual roles in this, as that we set the budget, we set the tax rate, and we also work this little company we got called Public Works. So, yeah, I would like to take some time to digest some of this.
In our modeling on this, Commissioner, I mean, we work from the basic assumption, rightly or wrongly, that the county has a land use plan, and the county has historical growth within that land use plan, and we attempt to then take that historical growth and project it out and say, here's the anticipated population in these areas based upon everything we know from growth management department, from dealing with municipalities, and from our own forecast. And then say, okay, if that growth is going to happen, we assume that most of that growth is going to want to connect to water and sewer. What we've seen in other areas, and you see it in Weddington, half of Weddington is on septic because the sewer wasn't there. The houses still came. They're on well, they're on septic. And what we're looking at is how do we make sure we have the capacity, because from a public works perspective, we think septic is not a good long-term solution for that density of development. We don't think wells are a good long-term solution for that density of development. So we don't try to, we leave that to the board to make the decisions as to where you would like to see growth take place or not take place, and how you want to do that in changes to land use or other issues. But we start with the land use plan, we start with the growth projections from that, and say, okay, our job is to provide that service. And you get to make the tough decisions on growth management.
And things can change in future years to where it is more affordable to, it looks like we're moving to technology and learning at home even, so maybe we save money on that kind of stuff in the future. But we do, Monroe is our economic development partner. You know, if we're gonna concentrate on not anti-growth and not anti-building sewer plant, but putting in a place where we have more commercial development that's likely. I mean, you know, you have a likelihood that Wingate and Monroe and Marshall will have more commercial development, especially with the bypass coming in, that that's something we need to take into consideration, I think.
But I have a concern with taking the approach of build it and hope they come versus if the growth is
Well, no,
here,
we-
let's support it.
Yeah, we.
I like his approach. Let's look 3 or 4 years down the road with the impact of the bypass and then see if we can partner with the city of Monroe.
Right, and then, you know, with Monroe now, Monroe still has some capacity now,
Yes.
right? The real key is that we do have capacity in 12 Mile Creek. Growth will continue because of the 12 Mile Creek plant, because of what Monroe has now. But if you're looking at, you know, projections, you know, maybe now is not even the right time to be talking about. Maybe once the bypass is in, that we start looking at it. But I definitely think that this is, the one you have here on Crooked Creek is going to be more of a issue than Fish and Wildlife. I think the conversations I had years ago with Fish and Wildlife, you know, the burden that we already have there now, to even, you know, to go full steam ahead to make it more faster, might be something we need to weigh on. And again, that's just my opinion, but it is something we have a dual role in this that, you know, saving 20 million in one place may cost a lot more than that somewhere else.
The concern I have, I'm sorry, Commissioner,
Go ahead.
is that, you know, we spent over a year working with Monroe. They are not ready to move forward. So by hinging any potential growth right now on their ability or willingness to move forward, they've made it very clear to us that they do not see the need to move forward anytime in the near future. That if we're relying on our existing capacity at Monroe and actually we're close to the cap on our existing capacity at Monroe, are we not?
We on max month, on average, we're okay, but you know, we've
Max
got
month.
issues on that max day
Right.
that we have to deal with.
And with 12 Mile Creek, then you're dealing with piping issues. If you're relying on 12 Mile Creek to handle some of these interim growth until further in the future, then you're gonna have to put in other infrastructure that you may or may not use in the future.
How many gallons a day does 12 Mile Creek pump, get pumped in from Poplar right now?
Right now, it's about 1 million gallons a day?
Yeah, a little over one.
And what's the capacity?
The capacity of the pump station
Mm-hmm.
is three or for firm capacity. But during a wet weather event, you're kind of already there.
So you're 1 million gallons a day.
That's what we are on average. The challenge we have in this Poplar Road area that's served by the Poplar Road pump station is that during wet weathers, we're near capacity. And that's why we're at a decision point of either we move forward with building a new pump station further downstream that could handle the growth and flow in that area and pump that over to 12 Mile, or we need to move forward with some other solution to treat that waste. We're recommending a new wastewater treatment plant in that area. But that is probably our most urgent decision is around that. There's capacity, again, in Monroe's facility, we think to last us through 2024 to 2028. We're going out for bid on the 12 Mile expansion in the next month or two now. So we're gonna have sufficient capacity here, but we're gonna need to reach a quick, short-term decision on do we stay with the original master plan and pump that over, or do we move with one of these alternatives that builds new capacity and keeps that capacity in the Yadkin Basin. So that's really the urgency is in this area. Again, you know, as county manager pointed out, we have capacity here right now. We're not seeing growth here. Where we're seeing growth is in this crescent. It's, you know, Indian Trail, Stallings coming into Weddington, Marvin, down to Waxhaw, that's the crescent where 80% of our growth in our utility customers is taking place. So, yeah, we could build more capacity here, doesn't mean people are gonna wanna move there. Where we're seeing the demand is in this area.
So you really don't need a Richardson Creek plant either?
We don't think we need one for quite some time yet. And that's what this option gives us, is time to really look at how we're gonna meet the longer term needs there. But we think we've got 10 years to work that out with one, before that plant needs to be online. Where we're in a bind here in 5 or 6 years.
Well, that's a double-edged sword, because you've got that growth in that area, because you've got sewer. And growth is gonna follow.
There's sewer here, Commissioner, right now. There's sewer capacity there today.
Okay, I understand. And when that bypass comes through, you may see a change in some of that, because that's gonna make availability
Mhm.
to the Charlotte metro area that's not there today. But I think we have to be careful that, you know,
In our
I don't want to facilitate overpopulation in that circle, as you call it. And you know, and I tell you what, that Poplin area, that's bull talc clay. So there's not gonna be much building unless there's sewer. So I think we need to think past that. The manager answered my question that I was gonna ask about Monroe. So basically what I heard you say is, Monroe's got no plans, so that's not an option right now.
Mhm.
That's correct. They believe that they have sufficient of capacity to last them at least 10 years,
Yeah.
about 12 years out. And so we see, based upon the growth we're seeing, based upon, and that's growth based upon the comprehensive plan, the data we see within our wastewater system, is we think we are going to need a facility within the next 6 years.
See, because I asked you a couple of years ago about sewer going up 601, and you said can't because Monroe's there.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you that talking with a number of developers, if there was sewer up there, they could buy that land for $10,000–15,000 an acre instead of paying 80 to 100. You'd have your growth moving in that area, and not necessarily taking over the agricultural place areas, but along the thoroughfares and the bypass and things like that. And
We've had developers talking to us already in this part of the county here that have purchased 300+ acres. They're holding it, but you know, this is an investment corporation. This is a bunch of people looking to farm it. They bought this as investment property.
How long ago did they buy it? How long ago did they buy it?
Don't know, they just approached us in the last couple of months going, you know, what are the county plans and what aren't the county plans in that area?
Because for the last 12 years, it's been hands off up there because of the hills.
Well, this is not in Goose Creek Basin. This is Goose Creek and Duck Creek right here. The interest is really on the downstream side of Crooked Creek here. So it's in this area right there.
I think the reason that Ed made the ask as it related to the task order is you anticipate it's less than $100,000?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that it still reserves your option, it allows us to proceed forward and at least having that analysis done. Doesn't commit you anything beyond that, and allows you more time to have, as we have ongoing discussions. But I think your issue is the summer months.
Mm-hmm.
So spend $100,000 for something we're not sure we want or not.
Or you lose a year if you decide that is the direction you want to go in. And I think at this point, that's about as
And on an
simple
$80
as
million
the issue is.
project, 1 year's worth of interest is a lot more than $100,000. That's why if we're going to go that way, we want to be able to start that process and try to keep it on track. And if the board decides, no, we don't want to go in that direction, in terms of our overall capital program, that's not a significant investment.
Any other questions?
You left one of the slides off. Can you explain the slide with the state on there?
That was the one
Oh.
I actually only printed.
That was just, if you want to know what utilities we surveyed, those are the utilities we surveyed in that rate comparison to similar sized utilities.
Okay.
So it was to answer that question in case it came up. but it got printed when, it was a hidden slide in my presentation. Glad to see commissioners are reading the presentation material.
There's no reason that we can't wait till Monday.
No, and that's fine. And I guess my question was, I was trying to get some kind of consensus, should I put it on the agenda for consideration
Oh, I
on
think
Monday
so.
or not?
I
This
agree
is the
with that.
consensus I was looking for, okay. Then, no, yeah, I wasn't pushing for an
Okay.
answer today, thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. That's all I have.
Thank you.